Many people believe that once winter comes and the windowsill gets cold, potted plants simply don't stand a chance. You place a pot by the window, the glass feels icy to the touch, and in your mind, you already imagine yellow leaves, limp stems, and roots freezing somewhere deep inside the soil. It almost feels like a lost cause before you even begin. I've heard this so many times over the years. Nothing grows for me in winter? I guess I don't have a green thumb. Plants just don't like my apartment. And you know what? I understand where those thoughts come from. When you try again and again and plants keep fading, it's easy to start blaming yourself. The leaves turn pale, the soil stays wet for too long, the plant stops growing, and eventually it just gives up. At that point, many people decide that houseplants are only for people with warm homes, new windows, and lots of free time. But the truth is very different. There are plants that simply do not care if the window is cold in winter. They don't panic when the temperature drops at night. They don't complain about drafts. They don't demand daily watering or constant attention. These plants can stand on the same windowsill for years, even decades, quietly doing their thing while life goes on around them. And here's the part many people don't realize. These plants are often the best choice for people who don't want to fuss, for people who don't want to lift heavy pots, move things around every week, or constantly worry about whether something will freeze or dry out. If you have old windows, a cold sill, or simply don't want delicate plants that need constant care, this video might completely change how you think about home gardening. Sometimes the secret isn't better soil, special fertilizers, or complicated routines. Sometimes the secret is simply choosing a plant that matches your real life. Today, I want to show you 5 plants that are not afraid of cold windowsills. Plants that can handle cool glass, dry winter air, and even a bit of forgotten watering. There's a good chance you already have one of them at home and just didn't know how tough it really is. The problem usually isn't the cold at all. For decades, people have been encouraged to choose plants based on how they look in the store. Bright flowers, shiny leaves, perfect shapes. But very rarely do we stop and ask a simple question. Will this plant actually be comfortable in my home? What happens instead is that we bring home plants that were grown in warm, humid greenhouses with perfect light and steady temperatures. They look beautiful under those conditions. But our homes are not greenhouses. They never were. So when that plant starts to struggle, we blame ourselves. We think we watered too much or too little. We think we placed it in the wrong spot. We worry that we're doing something wrong. This becomes especially frustrating as we get older. At some point, most people don't want plants that require constant attention. You don't want to be checking soil moisture every day. You don't want to carry pots back and forth to find better light. You don't want to repot something every few months or worry every time the weather changes. What you really want is something simple. A plant that stands there, grows slowly, looks decent, and doesn't create stress. Here's the key idea that changes everything. The problem isn't your windowsill. The problem is that many plants sold today are meant for ideal conditions that most real homes simply don't have. Once you stop trying to change your home to please the plant and instead choose plants that are happy with your home as it is, everything becomes easier. Over the years, I've noticed something very clear. There are plants that constantly need to be rescued from your home, and there are plants that are built to survive whatever your home throws at them. The first type demands attention. The second type quietly adapts. The plants I'm about to talk about fall into that second group. They can stand on a cold windowsill without complaint. They don't need daily watering. They don't require special tricks or constant rearranging. They just live calmly, steadily, year after year. These are plants that suit homes where life happens, where windows get cold in winter, where watering might be delayed, where peace and simplicity matter more than perfection. Let's start with the first one, Sansevieria, mother-in-law's tongue. This is one of the toughest houseplants I've ever seen. Many people already have it, often without realizing how strong it really is. Sansevieria has thick, upright leaves that feel almost stiff when you touch them. Those leaves store moisture, which means the plant doesn't panic if you forget to water it for a while. In fact, it prefers it that way. I've seen Sansevieria stand on cold windowsills for years. The glass gets cold at night, the temperature drops, and the plant doesn't flinch. It might slow down its growth in winter, but that's normal. It's resting, not suffering. One thing many gardeners have noticed over the years is that Sansevieria actually suffers more from too much care than too little. When people water it often, move it around, or worry too much, that's when problems start. Left alone, it thrives. It doesn't demand bright sunlight. It doesn't mind drafts. And it certainly doesn't need daily attention. This makes it an ideal plant for anyone who wants something reliable. I've known people who kept the same Sansevieria for 20 years in the same spot, same pot, same windowsill, minimal care, and it just kept going. That's the kind of stability many people are really looking for. Aloe aloe is another plant that understands hardship very well. In nature, it grows in places where water is scarce and conditions change often, so a cold windowsill doesn't scare it. The thick leaves of aloe are like storage tanks. They hold water inside, allowing the plant to survive long periods without watering. In winter, this becomes especially important. Many experienced gardeners will tell you the same thing. Aloe doesn't like wet soil and cold conditions. If the soil stays damp while the temperature is low, that's when trouble starts. But if you water sparingly, aloe remains calm and healthy. On a cold windowsill, aloe usually does just fine as long as you don't overdo it. Water once, then wait, and wait some more. In winter, weeks can pass before it needs another drink. What's remarkable about aloe is its lifespan. This is not a short-term plant. With simple care, it can live for decades. It becomes part of the home, quietly growing, leaf by leaf. Many people have noticed that aloe almost seems to appreciate being left alone. When you stop fussing over it, it looks better. Geranium. Geranium has been around for generations, and there's a good reason for that. It's one of the few flowering plants that doesn't mind cooler conditions. In fact, geranium often prefers slightly lower temperatures in winter. Near a window, where the air is cooler, it feels more comfortable than in a hot, dry corner of the room. I've seen geranium survive winters on old windowsills that felt almost icy to the touch. As long as the soil isn't soaked, the plant manages just fine. One observation that many longtime gardeners share is that geraniums actually bloom better when they experience cooler periods. They rest in winter, then come back strong when spring arrives. The biggest mistake with geranium is overwatering. People see the plant slowing down and assume it needs more care. In reality, it needs less. Given a steady spot and minimal watering, geranium can stay in the same pot for years. It becomes familiar, dependable, almost like an old friend. Chlorophytum. Chlorophytum is one of those plants that seems to forgive almost everything: dry air, missed watering, cooler temperatures. It handles it all with surprising grace. This plant is often recommended for beginners, but it's just as valuable for people who want simplicity. It doesn't need special conditions. It doesn't complain easily. Over the years, many have noticed that even if chlorophytum looks tired at some point, it recovers quickly. Give it time, and it bounces back. On a cold windowsill, chlorophytum might slow its growth, but it doesn't suffer. Its roots are strong, and its leaves adapt well to changing conditions. This is the kind of plant you can trust. It doesn't demand perfection. It just asks for basic care and rewards you with steady growth. Crassula, the money tree. Crassula, often called the money tree, is another plant that knows how to survive. Its thick leaves store water, making it very tolerant of dry conditions. In winter, when growth slows, Crassula actually prefers cooler temperatures. A cold windowsill doesn't bother it much, as long as the soil stays mostly dry. Overwatering is the real danger here. Many gardeners have learned this lesson the hard way. They water Crassula out of habit, not need. And that's when problems appear. When watered infrequently, Crassula can live for many years. It grows slowly, steadily, without drama. It's a plant that teaches patience, and patience is often rewarded with longevity. What all these plants have in common is not just toughness, it's compatibility. When a plant matches the conditions of your home, life becomes easier. There's no constant worry, no endless adjustments. The plant stands where it stands, and it lives. The secret isn't protecting plants from the cold at all costs. The secret is choosing plants that don't see the cold as a threat. Winter watering is where many problems begin. When it's cold, plants slow down. They drink less. Their roots rest. Year after year, many gardeners have noticed the same thing. Plants rarely die from dry soil in winter, but they often suffer from soil that stays wet for too long. Cold combined with moisture is hard on roots. That's why, in winter, it's better to underwater than overwater. If you're unsure, waiting a few more days is almost always the safer choice. Many hardy plants are perfectly fine being watered once every 2 or even 3 weeks during the cold season. They don't need reminders. They don't need schedules. They need patience. Another small detail that makes a big difference is what the pot sits on. Cold stone, tile, or marble pulls warmth away from the roots. You don't need anything fancy to fix this. A simple coaster, a thin piece of wood, even a folded napkin or old magazine can act as a barrier. It's a quiet solution that works without effort. Movement is another thing plants don't enjoy in winter. When days are short and light is weak, plants prefer stability. Many people move pots around trying to help, but constant change often does more harm than good. Once you find a place that works, it's best to leave the plant there until spring. Fertilizing is something that can wait. In winter, most plants are not actively growing. Adding extra food during this time doesn't make them stronger. In fact, many experienced gardeners have noticed that fertilizing in winter often leads to weaker growth later on. When spring comes and daylight increases, that's the time to think about feeding again. Slow-growing plants deserve special attention. Over the years, people have noticed that plants that grow slowly tend to live longer and handle stress better. They don't demand constant care. They don't react dramatically to small changes. They simply adapt. This is why one strong, stable plant often brings more joy than several delicate ones. A plant that lives with you for years becomes familiar. You stop worrying about it, you start enjoying it, and that's when houseplants truly become part of the home, not a source of disappointment. In the end, the goal isn't to prove that you can grow anything. The goal is to live comfortably with what you choose to grow. When the plant fits your life, gardening becomes quiet again, calm, predictable, almost effortless. And sometimes that's exactly what we need. If you've ever felt that nothing grows for you, I want you to remember this. It's not a personal failure, it's usually just a mismatch. Change the plant, not yourself. Choose something that fits your home, your pace, and your life. And suddenly, gardening feels calm again. If you found this video interesting, subscribe to the Still Growing Seniors channel. And I'd really love to hear from you. Write a comment and tell me which plants you have on your windowsill or which one you're thinking about trying next. We're all still growing, just at our own pace.